look at my 5-year-old son, my heart fills with joy. He's just like any other child his age. I remember how fragile he was when he was born, and how he would later face developmental delays. But little did I know that this challenge would unexpectedly reveal the true essence of my wife. I married Karen 8 years ago. She was an intelligent and beautiful woman. I was in love and sure that she was the one I needed in my life. Soon after, Karen became pregnant, a surprise, since we weren't planning on having children at the time, but we were open to the idea. Time passed, and our son was born. Despite the initial happiness, his birth was followed by challenges. He was weak, and we spent a lot of time in hospitals. We were completely immersed in the treatment process. Doctors warned us that the chances of his developing normally were slim. As he fell behind in his milestones, joy seemed far away. It was hard to remain hopeful. We invested a lot of time in countless doctor and specialist visits, and my parents were very supportive. Our child didn't go to daycare. Instead, his grandparents were always with him. At some point, my wife started going to church and would be gone for whole days. She became deeply involved in religious matters and believed she had the knowledge to help our son heal by praying to God. Even though I wasn't very religious myself, I believed in the power of faith, so I supported her, and it really gave her comfort and hope. She regularly attended church services and prayed for our son's recovery. I didn't delve into the details much, but I saw her come home from these visits calm and content. One day she told me she wanted to visit a monastery in another city where there was a holy place and a special icon she wanted to see. I wasn't very enthusiastic about the idea, but I didn't resist either when I saw the excitement in her eyes and heard her describe her expectations. And so she began traveling to various sacred sites and praying for our son's health. I understood that this was her psychological way of coping, and I didn't want to interfere with the path that was bringing her some relief. We were all looking for ways to help our child, and if her faith was giving her strength and hope, that was important to me. I knew that these were her psychological means of dealing with the situation, and I didn't want to put obstacles in her way if it gave her some form of relief. When Karen was away on her trips to monasteries and churches, either I or my parents would take care of our son. However, despite all her travels and prayers, no miracle occurred. My parents and I continued to monitor our child's condition and consult various specialists. However, Karen seemed to be growing more distant. She saw salvation only in the church, and her involvement in our child's care was virtually non-existent. About a year after her nationwide pilgrimage to holy sites, I decided to work from home one day. As I opened the computer, I noticed an unclosed social media page belonging to my wife. With each new message that popped up on the screen, a sense of dread washed over me. The messages were invitations to meet and spend time together. I opened the conversation and saw content that shook me to the core, sending a wave of shock through me. The page was filled with messages from men inviting Karen to intimate encounters. I felt as if my trust had been shattered, and an inner chill of fear took over. Mixed emotions swirled within me: anger, hurt, and concern. Questions arose about what had happened in her absence, and what stories my wife had been hiding. This revelation opened my eyes to the reality of what had been going on behind my back, and I realized that a serious conversation was in order. Over the past few months, my humble and overly religious wife had been exchanging messages with several men. These messages made it clear that they were her lovers. Her correspondence was explicit, and she even sent them photographs of herself. It turned out that she had several lovers, and instead of visiting holy sites, she spent time with her lovers. It was all so repulsive and disgusting to me. Meanwhile, While she was away, I took care of our son, working with my parents. She would come home after what she called prayer sessions and tell us how she had prayed for our son's health. She was amazingly deceptive. It was hard not to believe her. While she was having fun with her lovers, I, along with my parents, tried to cope with the situation by juggling work, childcare, and doctor's appointments. When my wife returned, I told her I knew all about her second life. In response to my questions, she simply bowed her head in silence and said I didn't understand. She even boldly looked me in the eye and asked if she should pack her things. Our child did not seem important to her. I replied in the affirmative that she should leave. Such disgust could not be forgiven, and so we began to live without her. Our efforts were eventually rewarded. Our son became more active and even began to speak. It was one of the happiest days of my life when I could forget my wife's betrayal and deception and focus on why I was living for my child's recovery. Karen never came to see our son or called him in all those years. In her eyes, he simply didn't exist. Some of my acquaintances, upon learning the truth about Karen, advised me to get a DNA test. They said there was a good chance he wasn't mine, but I refused. I felt that even if I found out he wasn't mine, it wouldn't change my commitment, so I decided not to do the DNA test. He's mine, and that's that.